my name is Natalie. I'm the HOD of the 2D department at Method here in Montreal. It's kind of strange to be up here. I don't see anything or anybody. So I'm very happy to be here with two of my colleagues, and they'll be joining us a little later. So I've joined the Method studio in Montreal back in October of last year. So I'm very happy to be in this huge global team that we are working very closely all together, since we have Sarah here from Vancouver. And we're starting to share more closely with the pipeline and the shows that we're working on right now. Just a brief history how my course in the VFX industry, I've been on this business for a little over 20 years right now, mainly as a compositor, but I started here in Montreal, so full circle back here, and got the chance to do the NAD Center that I think a lot of people here in Montreal are experiencing to get their education. Before it was a very short course, now it's a little more intense. After my NAD Center, I started here in Old Montreal in a small studio for a couple of years, so I gained a good amount of experience, but not using the Foundry tools. Back in the day, it was other kind of tools that we were using. After that, I decided to take a leap of faith and apply to a very pristine studio at ILM and got the chance to go work there for a couple of years. And I even have a colleague here that came to join me in Montreal, so another full circle. So I got to work there for a couple of years in California. That's where I mainly got my experience in the VFX industry. Started as a low-mid compositor and gradually came up to be able to do a comp supervisor role over there. Got great experience with working with fantastic artists, fantastic productions, and fantastic, obviously, supervisors there. Eventually decided to come back to Montreal for reason that our family, coming from here, and the industry got so big in Montreal, it kind of made it obvious to come back home would be a good idea, and thriving industry here in all these studios, and I guess the great talent that this city contains made it very interesting to join back the Canadian soil. So after that comp supervising, I did a little bit of DFX and VFX supervising, and decided to go into more of a management role, but at the same time staying very creative as how to maintain a good 2D team, how to have good growth in the team, if it's expanding or growth per different artists, how to make their career growth, understanding people, how they want to grow in this vast industry as well. Eventually, okay, hold on. I'm a little nervous right now. So when to come back to more of the Foundry event tonight, obviously, I came across to starting using Nuke back in 2009. That was back at ILM. They only had a couple of licenses, but the buzz in the business was kind of growing, especially in California, where it kind of grew. So got the chance to kind of said, I'm interested, I would like to learn it, because it was a shake back in the day. And I got, fell in love with the product, obviously, and now even like more than 11 years later, still using it and seeing how good it is and how it makes us, I think, better artists as creative, but technical too, because I think the two goes hand in hand. We can be very creative as artists, but we need the technique behind, and we need the great work that the Foundry is providing for us to, I think, alleviate the tedious little work that we have to do and make it more fun every day. So I guess I would like to, just checking my notes here. Well, since then I've been using Nuke, and I'm really thrilled that I can be talking about it being part of the Method family now, since we're getting bigger and bigger. I'll show the main project that we're going to talk about tonight is Ford versus Ferrari. We're giving that many examples that we had in the studio, but this is the one I think can shine a little better because it's nominated at the VES. So we're going to cross our finger for tomorrow night. Hopefully it's going to win something or not, but at least we're very happy that it's nominated. We didn't get the chance to work on it very much, but at all in the Montreal studio, but still it's on the method pipeline. It is something that we're working on really hard in Montreal as the change of pipeline is getting introduced. We get people that are experts in Vancouver, people that are expert here in Montreal, and working really closely how to, make it a more unified and solid pipeline. So I'll show the demo, and after that, I'll talk a little bit about the studio. Great work. What's the method vision that we are trying to promote, work on very hard, is unified pipeline, obviously, to spread across all the studios in the country and on the globe, sorry. Bringing the best of other facility tools into the global workforce, bringing the best out of our employees as well, and being flexible on sharing our work, the shows, the shots with the different departments in strength. And we're working closely with Vancouver at the moment on the show that we're sharing sequences, we're sharing assets, and it's very exciting to do this. Sarah will be talking about that. So thanks, Sarah.
Hello, people I can't see. My name is Sarah Fuller. I am a lead wow, this is going to be rough, guys. A lead look development artist at Method Studios. I started my career back in 2007 at Rhythm and Hues in Los Angeles. Let's get a big whoop whoop for Rhythm and Hues. No one? Okay. Rest in peace. Afterwards, I spent a few years in London, and then I've been in Vancouver for the past 6 years. I started as a lighter in the industry, but then I dabbled a little bit in look dev, as most lighters tend to do. But then about 4 years ago, I transferred over to look development full-time, and 2.5 years ago is when I started at Method Studios Vancouver, and I've been a lead artist for a little over a year now. We were trying to come up with fun little facts that we could tell about ourselves, to keep it interesting and keep you awake. So I was going to talk about the weirdest thing I've ever looked of, so my very first film as a lighter was Alvin the Chipmunks Big whoop up if you ever saw that. No? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's okay. It didn't win an Oscar. No, spoiler alert. So I lit the first one, but I also worked on the second one, the Squeakquel. And on that one, I did look development. And my main thing was look deving the female chipmunks' costumes. So like very tiny, sparkly dresses and bikinis and other chipmunk attire. So living that dream. Very exciting. So enough about that. I'm going to talk to you about how Method uses Mari and Katana across 3 different departments. We'll start with Mari because it's first in the pipeline. So we'll go forward with that. So Mari is the primary software used for texturing. Even if our texture artists use another software to supplement, like ZBrush for displacement, or sometimes they'll use a substance, we still have to export all of those maps through Mari. And this is great because then we know all the textures, no matter how they were created, have the same resolution, the same bit depth settings, and also the same color space settings, which is really important because LookDev gets mad if none of that matches. We don't really have a template for Mari per se. We do have a standardized workflow that consists of sharing layers to all textures and painting various masks. And we love using Mari because UDIMs have really changed our entire texture workflow. We get so much more resolution and richness from the maps. And the shader previews are great for painting displacements or any roughness or glossiness maps. It helps the texture artists who aren't usually necessarily very technical and know the exact values that LookDev would need for those maps. They're able to dial it in visually, which helps us in look development. Another thing that our artists are using a lot of now is the node graph in Mari. It's really easy to learn, which is great, and it's a much tidier workflow for more complex assets, and it's actually much more efficient, which we are trying to do across all departments going forward. So then after, of course, we move on to Katana and look development. Katana is new for Method Vancouver. We've only been using it for about 1.5 years. It was used at Method Sydney, which used to be Allura. And I should maybe go forward on the type. You can also see Method Sydney has since closed, so a little confusion. It's now Method Melbourne. Originally it was Allura, and then obviously Method Montreal, which used to be Atomic Fiction, also used Katana for a long time. And this was helpful because when we picked it up in Vancouver, our look dev team, none of us really had a huge amount of experience. We were all kind of learning it together, which was a lovely bonding experience, but it was a little tough. And so what we ended up doing was using several macros and tools from Allura when we were first setting up Ford versus Ferrari, which was our first show in Method Vancouver. And during the show, we obviously developed some of our own stuff, and then we supplemented with tools and macros from the old Atomic Fiction pipeline once we started combining forces with them this past year. This is great because we benefited from other workflows in our own. Like every studio does things differently. No one does everything the best. There are always some weird stuff that studios do, but it's great to pick and choose the things that work really well and create like just one Katana template to rule them all. We love using Katana because it's a node-based, non-destructive workflow. It's easy to branch out different material variations, do tests like with different cameras and render settings. It's much more visual. Like in general, I would say most artists are visual learners. Like visual effects is in the name. And so it's easier to understand, and any sort of like values or settings aren't hidden in like drop-down menus or layer overrides, and you can't see them, and it's hard to figure out what's happening. I personally love the interactive render filters, because I know there have been several times where I have left like a crop window on, or a weird camera angle, and then I send it off to the farm, and the next morning I have like a quarter of a render instead of a full turntable, which is always disappointing. And we particularly utilize the live groups a lot because with LookDev, our templates are pretty much the same for most assets. And so if we wanted to change some settings, it was nice just to change one and have that filter through all the templates as opposed to having to change every single asset's template. So we'll switch over to lighting for Katana. So different from our LookDev team, a lot of our lighters working on Ford versus Ferrari had used Katana at other studios and were quite experienced. So while they did pull some workflows from Allura, like the LookDev team did, they actually, most of our artists contributed to the workflow based on what they have done before. Ford versus Ferrari was an ideal Katana show because it was a very heavy environment show with a large amount of shots. It was around 570, but a small amount of sequences. So this was great because our lighters could set up sequence templates with separate branches to do shot overrides for light rigs and settings and so on. They also had a sub-template importer, which they're trying to pull over to LookDev right now. That would bring in their various passes, like all set up for them. So within their shot, if you had the cars and it was one of the night shots and it was rainy, you would have all the ground reflections and all of the effects passes all set up for you. And it was sort of like putting together a puzzle. This was great because then one lighter could work on several shots at once and then could render like a sequence at a time if they wanted. One thing we utilized was a YAML file to do bulk renders. So it was a text file that you could edit, and you could say, I want to render these passes for this shot and these passes for this one. And then you would actually launch that bulk render file from the terminal, and you could launch renders to the farm without even opening Katana, which was really helpful for several reasons. One including we had, one of the weekends, a supervisor was in, he realized the lighting shots weren't correct on the farm, and so he was actually able to relaunch shots using the render YAML file, and he didn't even have to open Katana, which is great because he didn't know how to use Katana, so thank God. All of this contributed to having a smaller lighting team. I think at most we had 12 lighters going, but usually it was around like 8. And they were able to work more efficiently and focus on the more beauty lighting aspects instead of having to do a bunch of setup. And honestly, we would not have been able to complete the amount of shots that we did on time, especially with the size team that we had. And in the end, even though it was our first show doing like this whole Katana workflow, it actually went really smoothly, which is always a relief. And it ended up saving us money, which is always good. Everybody likes to save money. So yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. And yes, big root up for VES. Hopefully we win. Yay. So now I'm going to pass it on to Cody. He's going to talk about Nuke and Compositing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cody McKenzie. I'm a compositing supervisor at Method Studios. I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Worked in a few small studios in Vancouver, 6 years working in the visual effects department for Stargate, the TV series. And the last 8 years have been at Method, the past year in Montreal. Okay. What have we been doing in Nuke? So templates are part of our latest development for lighting and comp, the focus being on automation. We've added a few features to some of the Nuke nodes. So now these Nuke nodes can be updated based on a certain set of defined rules. These nodes can include your read nodes, so like your light renders, your pre-comps, your roto, but it can also include lens distortions, resolution reformats, and write nodes. So an example of what this offers, we can use templates, in Nuke for sequences. So this is something built typically by your lead or your supervisor that's handed out to artists on the team. With a few clicks, or hotkeys, they can update all of the nodes in their Nuke scene. This obviously helps. You don't have to fish around to all of your renders and find out which ones you're supposed to use. Another example is for batch processing. So sometimes we have to render large quantities of neutral graded plates, or work resolution plates, or degrain plates. So now this can be all relatively automated, or at least done by just one artist, and a render farm, obviously. And the main example is the light auto comp. So this was used on Spoiler. And basically, when a light render is launched, when the render is complete, it will kick off a Nuke scene. It will update those passes that completed and daily them for the next review session. This is an example of one of our main templates. So pretty standard. You guys have seen most of these, but basically, we have all of the assets that would be in a sequence, and all of these will populate with the renders that are available, and if they're not available, they are simply disabled. So with these advantages, compositing artists have more time to work on image layers for each shot. So the template can be updated with key extractions, rotor layers, background pre-comps. In addition, lighting artists can now focus on the creative aspects of their shot rather than publishing dailies and slap comps. We love you, Nuke.